virtual. Thank you. Welcome everyone to Literacy Volunteers of Huntington Beach, our virtual wine and words event with our special guest, author Kaira Rouda. Kaira, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to remind our viewers that this is running concurrently with an auction. We will speak a little bit about literacy volunteers and the auction, and then we will move right into the interview. A word first about Literacy Volunteers of America, particularly at the Huntington Beach Public Library. We believe that the ability to read provides the fundamental key to survival in our society. It's crucial to individual freedom and to true democracy. Literacy opens the gates to personal satisfaction and the fulfillment of dreams. Our mission and commitment is to establish literacy as a fundamental skill possessed by each and every member of our community. To this end, we will recruit and train volunteers to tutor adults one-on-one in basic reading skills, recruit adult learners and match each with a trained tutor, maintain a teaching material library for the use of tutors, and offer support services to tutors and their adult learners. So thank you everyone who's tuned in today and everyone who is interested in the auction. Again, you can look online for our auction items. The auction is open from now until the end of, till 7 o'clock in the evening on Monday. So 2 more days, and you will be able to pick up your items at the Huntington Beach Library main branch on Tolbert. And now right away to Kaira Rouda, author of the new book, Somebody's Home. And before we start, I just, as I was telling Kaira a moment ago, I am slightly angry at her because she has kept me awake most of the night last night. I picked up a copy and started reading it. And it is, I mean, it is a cliche, of course, that I couldn't put it down, but I started reading this. And I said, well, I will just read enough so I'm coherent for this. And then at about 12:30, I said, well, done. I'm good. So congratulations. This is a real, this is an out there book. I was very impressed.
Oh, come on. It's not that far out there. It's just suspense.
It is suspense. Kaira, would you like to read a portion of the book before we start?
Sure. I mean, do you want me to set it up a little bit? I can read the back cover. I love the back cover stuff too. Okay. So, and the question from Heather is, I've read Best Day Ever and The Next Wife. Does Harley, that's my husband, ever get freaked out or nervous knowing what kind of twisted characters you write about? Yes. As a matter of fact, he sleeps with one eye open. Anyway, okay. Somebody's Home is, this is the back copy. It says, lock your doors, close the blinds, and pretend that you're safe. That's what Harley does. Julie Jones has left her suffocating marriage. With her teenage daughter, Jess, she's starting over. Their new house in Oceanside is the first step toward a new life, even if it does come with the unexpected. The previous owners, a pastor and his wife, have left something, or rather someone, behind. Tom Dean has a bitter hatred for the father who considers him a lost cause, and for the woman who's moved into their family's home, the only home he's ever known. He's never going to leave. She thinks he'll be gone in 3 days, but Tom has the perfect plan. For a newly single mother and her daughter, a fresh start is the beginning of a nightmare. Before the weekend is over, somebody is going to get exactly what they deserve. Scary, right? Okay, and I thought I'd just start by reading the first section. So each of the characters in the book have their own first person point of view. And so this is Tom, who was referred to in the back cover copy as the kind of grumpy 20-something young man who has been living in his parents' carriage house and has now been told that he has to leave. So a bolt of lightning illuminates the sky and raindrops the size of rocks shield. Today is unusual. It never rains in Southern California, not in October. October's for fires and destruction, for Santa Ana winds and red flag warnings. The rain doesn't make sense. Nothing about my life makes sense. I've just spent a week in the desert with my buddies, shooting guns, drinking beer, partying. I loved it, every minute of it, but now it's over and I have no choice. I'm back home, but it's not my home anymore. I'm parked across the street, contemplating my options, staying dry and practicing controlling my anger all at the same time. I have anger issues. Just ask my folks. I came this way. But it was one of the things my friends and I talked about as we each imagined the target of our anger on the beer can as we shot. Anger causes mistakes. When you're angry, the guy who owns the land told us, your actions are sharper. You sweat, your heart races, you're jumpy, like now. I wipe my hands on my jeans and take a deep breath to calm down. He taught us that too, out there in the desert, meditation or whatever they want to call it. It's harder to do now that I'm back. It's always been hard for me to relax, to breathe. I look out the window again as the windshield wipers smack the rain away. That's my house, the only place I've ever lived. I know every floorboard squeak, especially on the stairs, but I won't get to climb them anymore. My so-called parents and the new owners have made certain of it. Sure, I knew my dad was moving to take another job, and I guess I knew they'd need to buy a house out in Timbuktu. But why do I have to leave? No one ever gave me a chance to have a say. 2 weeks ago, I received what was basically a verbal eviction notice from my own parents. A "Dear Tom, we're moving. Sorry, the new owners need the carriage house for themselves" talk from my lovely stepmom. I didn't even know the house was on the market. They never even put a for sale sign up in the front yard. Sandy told me it was a private transaction. The perfect buyer had simply appeared. God's will, she said. Is that God's will or yours, Sandy? Just bam, we're out of here, and you are too, Tom. Too bad, Tom. Sure, because she felt bad, my lame stepmother said, you are welcome to move in with us in our new home in Temecula, just until you can find a place of your own. Oh, thanks, Sandy. Your new place is just for the four of you. You and Dad and your real boys. 3 bedrooms, that's it. I know it. She didn't say that part, but she should have. Since then, I've been to their new place, with and without them, scoping it out. There's no room for me there. Actions are louder than words. We talked about that in the desert this week, too. Actually, I suppose I learned that when I watched my real mom drive away all those years ago. People say you can't remember things from when you're 6 years old, but that's a lie. When you look out the window and watch your mom back out of the driveway, when you watch your dad spit at her car window, when you see the fear in her eyes, the hate in his, well, you remember, no matter how young you are. I push away the memories of 17 years ago and stare through the pouring rain at the same driveway. I suppose it's good I went to the desert this week. I made friends, real friends, guys who think the way I do, guys who know how the world works and what's wrong with it these days. I got out of my rut, but now I'm back from the desert and sitting in my car in a freak rainstorm, staring at a house that's no longer mine, starting on Sunday, 2 days from now. Sandy said it was a gracious concession by the new owner to give me time to pack up since I was gone all week. 2 days to try to get a new place to live just doesn't seem very gracious, if you ask me. But they didn't. They think I'll just go along with the plan, do what they expect, move out. That's what they all think. I pound my hands on the steering wheel, release a bunch of tension, and stare out the car window again. I don't want them here. This is my house, mine.
Wow.
Ta-da.
And needless to say, things deteriorate rapidly.
Yes. When somebody won't move out of the backyard, it can be a problem for everyone involved.
Well, congratulations on Somebody's Home, which is available at your local public library and at Lido Books, which happens to be a great supporter of the literacy volunteers. Hello, Lido Books.
Yeah.
So reading it last night, a couple of things were going through my mind. I had read somewhere that you had written this during the height of COVID, before there were vaccines and when we were all locked inside. So how was that? And was this a pandemic book, even if it's not about the pandemic?
Right. I mean, I guess I was writing this, or the idea of it came to me during those times, when and we didn't know if the COVID was in the air or on all our surfaces, and we're washing groceries and we're just freaking out because we'd all never been in a pandemic before. And, all my kids moved home and we're all just, hunkered down. And I guess I started thinking that, well, at least we're all safe here together at home. And what if home isn't safe? And that's kind of where the story idea came from. And then just how terrifying that is to want to feel safe. And then the character Tom popped in my head, which you just heard a little from him. So he was the first guy that showed up to want to talk about this house. And so the idea kind of came from that. And I think that it definitely is the darkest one of my stories I've written so far. And I do think it was because there was so much angst in the air and so much uncertainty and just a lot of fear. So I think that's where it all came from. These characters.
You have 2 other books that you created during the pandemic. Your previous and your upcoming book. Are they sort of thematically connected in some way, do you think?
Well, the next wife I'd written before the pandemic came, but then it released during the pandemic. So that one is more, I guess, more just straight on grown-ups behaving badly, the first wife, the second wife, and then the man between them. And so I don't feel like that one has the influence of the pandemic in it, but definitely Somebody's Home is definitely dark. The Widow, which comes out in November, is set in DC. It's going to be my first DC book, which is fun because I got to know it a little bit. And that one does as well have the lingering kind of doom we all felt in it, unfortunately, but it's not about the pandemic either. And then, yeah, I have another one that's on submission that is again product of the pandemic. So we'll see if they keep liking my darkest. But I think, you know, it's a way to process what's going on by creating story and kind of building your own world. I mean, I can control most of the time I can control what my characters are going to do, what they're going to say, and you know, I can kind of rein them in. And then, but during the pandemic for so long, we didn't have any answers, and you know, just things just kept coming at us all around. So, yeah, that was much scarier than any book I could write. I think, really.
You said most of the times you can control what you're writing. Do sometimes your characters take you by surprise?
Oh yeah. Like these people in this book, they were even worse than they ended up being.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, I was actually writing a scene up here and I scared myself so bad. Shut the computer down. I'm like, I cannot let them do that. So it was actually Tom. His plans were even worse than what he ends up planning. So yeah, so then I had to like dial him back. So yes, I'm what's called a pantser. So I write by the seat of my pants, and I kind of let the characters do what they want to do, and they kind of show up when they want to show up. And that's usually really great. And like, except during a pandemic when they get really, really fired up and scary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I must confess, I'm delighted by the mental image I now have of you in your office writing all of these scary things and then giggling.
But then also scaring myself. That's funny.
Scary. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure people go, what was she thinking? Because you're so, you know, against type, you know, considering the way you write.
I am cast against type, but actually, you know, you just never know what's beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. That's my tagline, actually. So yes. I kind of do that, but I am actually a happy person. I just like to kill people in fiction, of course, fictionally. Yeah.
So, you know, it seems to me that there's a recurring theme in some of your books about the face that's behind what looks like our happy lives. I mean, it's certainly in Best Day Ever. It's in Somebody's Home. It was in The Next Wife. Why does that resonate with you so?
You know, it just always has. And I usually, my settings are suburbs usually. And I'm a person, you know, and I'm also, my background's in marketing. So I feel like everything that went together to create suburbs I've experienced in some ways. And a lot of it is the whole keeping up with the Joneses notion, and the grass is always greener, and the whole thought that you can't really let people see what's really happening in your life. You know, you put on a happy face and go to work, you put on a happy face and go play tennis or whatever, pickleball, whatever you're doing. And that's, you know, that's just kind of my setting, my setting in my life. So I think that's always intrigued me, that you really can't know what's happening behind closed doors, and no matter what somebody's going to tell you. And then with the advent of social media, holy cow, this became a fact on steroids. So I guess that's kind of where my brain envisions everything happening, and what I'm drawn to.
Yeah, I was also, one of the things that really struck me was the centrality of the notion of home in Somebody's Home, because, you know, home is where you're safe. Home is where the heart is. Home is where the zombies can't get you. It seemed that you just went right for the throat with Somebody's Home.
I know, it's terrible. Well, I mean, it's not terrible. I think it's really fun, but yeah, right. That's what I said. Like, this is my darkest book, because you do want to feel like, yeah, home is where the heart is. And Julie, my other main character and her daughter Jess are starting over, and to Julie, this home embodies everything that a fresh start means, right? She's got visions of how she's going to repaint it and redo the kitchen, and she's unpacking her cookbooks that she hasn't seen for all these years because she has all this money and chefs and all that stuff. So she's like, this represents a fresh start and a new beginning. And then as you could tell from the reading, Tom is in the carriage house and doesn't want to go anywhere. So, I mean, that whole notion that you know, right across the backyard is someone that's really angry and doesn't want to leave is kind of scary.
Yeah. And another thing that sort of struck me, and I'm sure it was probably the furthest thing from your mind, but I was sort of struck, and I'm sure being a writer, and I'm sure to be a writer, you have to be a voracious reader. So I'm sure you're extraordinarily well read. What I kept on feeling slight haunting of Hill House, even though this is not a supernatural novel. It seemed very Shirley Jackson to me.
Oh, that's the biggest compliment ever. She's like my hero. So thank you. Really. Wow.
Oh, well, because I'm sure in Haunting of Hill House, as you remember, Eleanor is going to the house, and this is her new beginning.
Right.
And the house had different ideas. And
I hadn't even put that. Oh, wow. Thank you. That's awesome.
And I was reading this, I'm like, yeah, they're going to the new house, but the house doesn't think they're going. And I know it's not a supernatural novel, but it just had this real Jacksonian feel along with the prose, which also, and this is, you know, and you'll probably hand me my head for this, but I also, no, seriously, I also felt a little Updike there. Because, you know, well, no, because John Updike wrote about a particular segment of society with a very clinical eye. And with The Next Wife and Best Day Ever and Somebody's Home, you're really hitting a piece of the demographic pie with a sort of clinical and almost scientific clarity. It's like, oh, I know these people right away. And I thought it was just a remarkable piece of observation on your part, as well as a good suspense.
Yeah, the biggest compliment is when I used to be on book tour, or now when I'm on Zoom tour, when people say, wait, how did you know my suburb? Have you lived in blah, 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 you know, whatever part of the country it is? And that's a really big compliment too, because yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of commonalities. And if you look at it clinically, like maybe I do, that yes, that there's a lot that we have in common as suburban dwellers.
Suburban dwellers, yes.
Yes.
I thought another interesting is that you so effortlessly moved from point of view characters, and how did that work in your brain?
I know, isn't that weird? You know, and that's really, for me, that's really fun when I'm writing it, because Best Day Ever, as you know, and The Favorite Daughter were all one character, first person point of view. So that's a lot for a book to carry. I didn't really realize that because, like I said, I don't plan things out, but you know, and Paul was the first person point of view in Best Day Ever, and then Jane and The Favorite Daughter. And so then when The Next Wife came along, and I thought at first it was going to just be the second wife, you know, the next wife's point of view, and that Tish would be speaking to you the whole story. And then all of a sudden Kate pops in, the first wife, and she's like, you know what? I have something to say about this. And then all of a sudden the daughter pops in. She's like, I got something to say. So it's really fun. And, you know, it sounds weird, but the characters are pretty firmly in my head, especially when they like knock on the door and want a speaking role. So it's not that hard to keep them straight. What is hard for me to keep straight, because I'm not writing from an outline, is whose turn it is to talk, because all of them want to talk. You know? So they're listening to what Tom's saying, for example, and Julie's like, wait, I've got something to say about that, or just does. So I had to keep a little chart of who got to talk next.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because otherwise, like, one of them would just take over everything.
Yeah. Wow. So you were just talking about some of your methods for putting this together. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer? Because I know you're a woman of many careers. I mean, you started out in advertising and journalism, and then in real estate and all kinds of entrepreneurial efforts, and you did a lot to help women in the workplace. And here you are now, a writer. So, you know, what is it that made Kaira go from there to there to there, and now finally here?
Well, you know, I think everything is additive when you want to be an author. So the more experiences you have, better it is, I think, when you go to the page, because you can kind of bring it all forward with you. But yes, to your point, I was an English major in college. I knew grade that I wanted to be an author. I wrote to my favorite author back then, Robert McCloskey of Make Way Beans and Blueberries for Sal, because our third grade teacher gave us an assignment to do that. And he wrote back and he's like, well, thank you for your note. I'm glad you like me as an author, but I'm really an illustrator, so you should choose more carefully next time. So I like that because it kind of, in a nutshell, it indicates the author's journey, right? Like, like that. But anyway, and I never had, like, I didn't write for the school paper or anything like that in college, but like I said, I was an English lit major, and I went to Vanderbilt, where Southern Lit was like still so present, and these professors that I had like known, Walker Percy, and like, you know what I mean? It was still so present. Anyway, but I didn't write for anybody to read until I got my first magazine or newspaper job. Magazine and newspaper, and having that byline was really scary at first, but practice. And then working in advertising, I wrote every type of advertising copy, like manuals for electronics to, radio show ads and TV ads.
PR.
Yeah, and then PR too.
Yeah.
And I switched into that, and then my husband was rolling up a bunch of companies and needed a brand. And I had just been vice president of marketing for Stanley Seymour Carpet Cleaning, which is a funny thing to me still. I was like the first woman with an office and like in a vice president role, but things happen and you have to file class action lawsuits. So then you go on to other things. So then my husband and I worked together, and I got to create a brand called Real Living, and we grew it to 22 states. And then the real estate, the recession, so we sold it. And then we moved to California, and then I was on a speaking tour at that point because I had written a book for women entrepreneurs called Real You Incorporated, 8 Essentials for Women Entrepreneurs. Men can read it too. And that was because I worked with all these fabulous real estate agents, majority of them women. And it was one of the first careers where women can make as much as or more than men, which was awesome. Anyway, so that inspired that, and I'm on this speaking tour, and I'm speaking to groups of women all over the country, and I'm telling them, put your passion into action, live the life of your dreams, and it's never too late to go for what you really want. And then I realized, darn it, you haven't done it yet. You haven't done that novel writing thing that you always wanted to do. So that's when I sat down and wrote my first book. Is that a long-winded answer?
Oh, so your first book was a nonfiction book. Is that a different part of your brain? I mean, what was what are the challenges with nonfiction and fiction? And would you do another nonfiction book?
I would, maybe. What's great about nonfiction is it's very orderly. And so I was writing, actually, it was going to be just a pamphlet, I guess, for the American Marketing Association. They asked me to write, but then I sat down and wrote this outline. I'm like, maybe I could sell this to somebody else. So I just I literally sent it to an agent, and Wiley, editor at Wiley, the same day, which you're not allowed to do bad thing. And they both called that day, like the next day, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, that never happens, just so you know. And so the agent's like, have you talked to them yet? I'm like, no. And she was like, I'll handle it. So I got a book deal like in 10 minutes. It was crazy. So then I wrote that book, and the thing about nonfiction is you really do have to go speak to large groups of people to explain all the things that you've just written down. Just read the book, right? But so then I had to hire a speech coach and learn how to do public speaking, because that was never really part of the plan. So I guess I would maybe write a nonfiction, but I really like the fiction world better. It's less linear and it's a lot more fun. So I started out after the dawning that I hadn't done it yet. In 2011, I published my first women's fiction novel. And it was kind of sweet. It was based on the speech that I gave across the country for putting your passion into action, really incorporate. So it's very, the main character has a things to change list that she works through, and it's very heartwarming. And then from then on, I've just gotten darker and darker and darker and darker. It's true. Yeah.
Clearly you have no problems with public speaking now.
No, but I had to work on that, boy. Really? I mean, I did. I had had the speech coach, and boy, yeah, it's hard. I mean, at least it is for me. I'm pretty much of a natural introvert.
Okay. You certainly don't seem like an introvert.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. See, thanks to my speech coach.
So you were talking about your books getting progressively darker. So we could say that you wrote thrillers. We could say you wrote domestic suspense novels, but they're really hard to pigeonhole because they're so real. I mean, if thrillers are an awfully big tent, you have Ian Fleming and Leslie Charteris and Sax Rohmer, on one end all the way over there, and then you have you and Mary Higgins Clark, and how did you think about carving out a space in the thriller sphere for you, or was all of this sort of organic? I mean, when it was time to write your first novel, was it thriller what came to you, or did you say?
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty organic because I was writing women's fiction, and my agent, I'd given her an outline for kind of a 4-part series of women's fiction novels, really sweet, again, based around a salad bar at school, I think. And she was reviewing it, and I got Paul, the character for Best Day Ever, just popped into my head. And I write pretty fast. So I wrote this manuscript. I sent it to my beta reader, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is the best thing you've written. You need to show it to your agent." So I sent it to Katie. I'm like, "Please, will you read this just really fast? I know you're looking at the other thing, but I think I'm going to put a pin in the series." And she's like, "Oh, I don't like this kind of book." I think you'll like it. But anyway, and then the next day goes by, and I said, because my friend's like, "You might need a different agent." I'm like, "Oh, that'd be sad." And then I wake up in the morning, the next, like 2 mornings later, and she's had like 7 messages in my inbox, like, "I love this. I can't wait to sell this." And that was kind of fun, but it wasn't really planned. Like I said, they just kind of pop into my head. But I do love, I don't know if you saw this, the Kirkus review for Somebody's Home.
No,
It cracks me up. Okay, so this is apparently what I'm known for now. So I don't know what genre this is exactly, but whatever the opposite of family values is, Rouda seems intent on perfecting a genre that enshrines it. I know, and only somebody like me would love that. I love that.
No, that's quite wonderful.
Yeah.
Would you say that your thrillers or your suspense novels or your psychological novels or your domestic chillers are for men and women, for women,
I think they're for everybody.
Yeah, because I would go with for everyone too. I only ask because of your previous desire to write women's books.
Yeah, I mean, and like that women's fiction label is bad too, and I shouldn't say domestic suspense because it's kind of like it's just different forms of fiction. So it's I guess like a happier form of literary fiction or something like that. Contemporary fiction is probably a better name for it. So yeah, good point. Because
and also married couples and coupledom is so central to the next wife, to somebody's home, the best day ever, and it's fascinating that you're able to make these real these relationships real, and then put them in the realm of a suspense novel, because even without the element of suspense, all of them would work perfectly well as This Is How We Live Now novels.
Yeah, good point. I know, and I think my characters could be just couples behaving badly and not have like murderous intentions, but I think it's more fun for me to have somebody have murderous intentions. Yeah. So I think that's just why my brain just kept getting darker and darker, because it's really fun to have fictional murderous intentions.
Speaking of fictional intentions, I'm just going to pause for a moment. I would like to read some of the comments that we've gotten from our students, not here on the thing, but our learners in the literacy program. We always like to let people know some of our successes. One mom reported progress towards reaching her goal of helping her daughter's 5th grade class. She described a comfortable and positive conversation with the teacher when she goes in to volunteer. So, I mean, that's just another illustration of why literacy is so important. And it keeps you in business too.
Yes, it does keep you in business. Yeah.
One learner accomplished his goal of getting a new job in the medical field, earning a higher hourly rate than his last job. His tutor is very proud and feels he has come a long way in all of his English skills, reading, writing, and conversation. And then my favorite and my last one, another learner is now comfortable with completing her vocabulary homework assignments using Google Docs She uses this vocabulary technique in all of her daily work. And another learner has successfully delivered a presentation at work to a team of dentists. Her manager complimented her on her presentation, both written and verbal. So everyone who's watching today and taking part in our silent auction, this is the kind of stuff that happens thanks to literacy volunteers. So back to Kaira. Thank you so much for that little pause.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for transforming lives, all of you literacy volunteers. Amazing.
So we were talking about the centrality of marriage to your books, and that also has a respected tradition in thrillers, everything from Rebecca, to Jane Eyre. Why does that resonate for readers so much? I mean, is that like home? It's so central to who and what we are.
I think so. I think it's that whole notion of the person that you're supposed to trust and that you love the most or the closest to can actually be a monster, and that's scary.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of your influences. There's a real Southern Gothic flavor to some of your work. Were you
Really?
big on Southern Gothic writers? Yeah, in the sense that you read Shirley Jackson. It's like so much of this is, well, these are our daily lives and we're real people, but outlandish things are happening to us, and there is a sort of taste of the outlandish with Southern Gothic, I think. Were you a keen fan of Southern Gothic?
No, I mean, I love everything. So I definitely took Southern Lit courses at Vanderbilt, which was amazing with this, oh my gosh, this professor, and I can't remember his name at the moment, but I have two, like Professor Bell, and they would read, these novels and books and stories, and it would come to life with these deep Southern drawl. It was so amazing. So, I mean, there's nothing like having Faulkner read to you by a guy from like rural Georgia. It was so amazing. Anyway, but I mean, I guess I don't think of myself as Gothic. I guess, I think of myself as more definitely inspired by that whole history, I guess, of reading, and probably all those words swirl around in my head. I mean, I also love The Great Gatsby and, like just like the classics like that. So they're all in there someplace, but gosh, I'm happy to be compared to anybody. Literally, it's like very flattering to me, but I don't think that way when I'm writing. I just my characters just think for themselves.
So of all of your published books, Favorite Daughter, Best Day Ever, Somebody's Home, Best The Next Wife, do you have a favorite child?
Oh, isn't that terrible? You're not really supposed to, I hear, in life or books. But I think I would have to say Best Day Ever is, in the sense that it was my big breakout book. And so Katie, I was just referring to, my agent, she put it out on submission, and then HarperCollins Harlequin acquired it. And not a huge advance, just I was thrilled. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so great. So then I get a call like maybe 2 months later from my new editor who says, oh, we've decided to launch a new imprint called Graydon House, and your book's going to be one of the 2 lead books of the imprint. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but that sounds fabulous. Like a few days later, they call back, they're like, oh, and you know what, we're going to make it hardcover. I'm like, get out of Dodge. And so, it just like, it was that kind of moment. And then the best was they sent me to BEA, the Book Expo in New York at the Javits Center. And I'm walking in to like meet my editor, and I walk in the door, and there's this banner with Best Day Ever's cover on it that had to be like 20 stories tall. I mean, it just seemed huge. It was this huge banner. I don't know what the exact side was. And I was just, oh my goodness. And so I'm standing there, and there's this man that's signing people up for American Express cards, and he thought I was having a stroke. He's like, are you okay, ma'am? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my book right there. He's like, that? I'm like, yes. And he's like, you need a picture. So he like took a picture for me and everything. So anyway, so in that sense, Best Day Ever was so fun because, it was just like a dream, the whole publishing part and the whole, just the support, and seeing your book on a huge banner was really fun.
Wow. So that was the moment where you said, I've checked off this dream.
Yeah, and that, and I think, and like I said, I really do believe publishing is like this, like a lot of things in life, right? So it's important to celebrate those kinds of moments because, yeah, you never know if that's going to happen again. And yeah, and just that's one of those moments. So that's probably why Best Day Ever gets kind of my favorite kid status, just because it gave me so many amazing first time moments.
Mhm.
But I like them all.
So now what's the process for you? Do you have a snippet of an idea? Do you sit down? I know you're a pants writer.
A
Uh,
panther, yes, by the seat of my pants.
but I mean, do you just have do you devise characters? Do you devise the initial situation? I mean, what is the journey for you there?
It's strange, really, Bob, because they will just kind of pop into my head, and usually in the middle of the night. So I have like a little notepad next to my bed, and sometimes I write legible things. Other times I'm like, what does that even say? I don't even know. What are you trying to? Yeah, so that's usually where it started out. And right now something's bubbling up. So I have just this like little piece of paper that has like a few words on it, and that's just going to sit there for a while. So I'm in the middle of final edits for the one that comes out in November, and then I just submitted that other one I was talking about. So I'm fermenting right now the next idea. So I guess that's what I do. And then suddenly I'll usually get a title or a character that pops into my head, and sometimes both.
Okay.
For the Best Day Ever, which I guess this never happens, and it actually hasn't happened since, they've kept my original title. So Paul and Best Day Ever kind of popped into my head at the same time. So that was, yeah, see, that's another thing. But all the rest of the titles have been changed from what my original.
Title for somebody's home.
I don't even remember now. I'll have to think about that, but it wasn't somebody's home. Yeah. And yeah, something about a house. I can't remember, but yeah. And the next wife was the second wife. And okay. I don't remember what the favorite daughter was, something about like what comes around. Like I like those kind of phrases, and they're like, no, it's gonna be the favorite daughter. But anyway.
Okay. And what's the editorial process like for you?
I'm
not with editors necessarily. I mean, after you do your first draft, are you a multi-drafter or?
Yes. Well, yeah, I love the first draft. That's my favorite. And all the pain starts, but yeah. And then I will have my beta readers look at it. My daughter, if there's a teenage or a 20-something daughter in it, then it will go to my agents, like where one is right now, and they'll either. Sometimes they really like it and then they don't have any changes, but you never know. So I'm waiting to hear back whether they just hate it, they love it, or something in between. So we're hoping like love it or lightly in between. So, and then it goes on, to the publisher, and hopefully they love it. But then there's just all those rounds of edits, which I'm learning to embrace and say, this is how we learn and grow as an author, each round of edit. So my daughter was teaching me this. She's like, Mom, you're all grumpy because you got another round, but you should be thanking them for helping you get better. So now I'm thankful. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you seem to be just exploding with creativity. So when you were in advertising and real estate, where were all of these characters in these plots?
I was working with them. Just kidding. Just kidding, everyone.
The homicidal maniacs. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding. Just kidding. Maybe not. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the dream is always there. It's just a really busy time to be writing things down. I would go to like writers conferences. There were some great ones near us in Ohio. Maui Writers Conference I went to one year, which was so fun. And I had just finished the draft of Here Home Hope, and Jacqueline Michard, who wrote Deep Into the Ocean. I don't know if you remember that, and it was huge. It was first Oprah book pick. She was the keynote, and I'm like at someplace in the middle of the audience after she gives her speech, and I'm walking out, and I just happened to walk out right next to her. Like, oh, this is fate. You've got to say something. So I'm like, hi, I'm a big fan. All the fan things, and so we walked all the way to where the hotel situation was, just the two of us. It was crazy. And then by the end of the talk, she's like, oh, well, do you have any finished manuscript? I'm like, I do. As a matter of fact, I just finished my first one. And she's like, well, I'd love to read it for you. I'm like, what? So she
Wow.
ended up giving me an endorsement blurb for Here Home Hope, which was amazing. And now
Wow.
she has a book out on the same day as Somebody's Home came out. Her new book just came out too, and she hasn't had a book for a while. It was so crazy. And so that, like, the Crime Writers magazine, the Big Chill, had a big picture of her, and then my little name is on the cover too. I'm like, oh, this is so cool, because it's, it's like all that symmetry and
A
stuff.
circle.
Yeah.
Now, do you find most writers are generous with their time and advice? And
I do. I'd say I mean, like 98% of the authors I've met will bend over backwards to help each other if they can, or to help you, if they're not on some crazy deadline or, doing that. I mean, without question, it's been so amazing to me how many people, ask for an endorsement blurb and they're like, sure, really, yeah, big people, it's been great.
yeah. And did you have many mentors that you were working with when you were, or has this been a solitary pursuit largely?
I think it's largely solitary. Yeah. I think writing is solitary. It's just that thing that you do. I mean, I think most work is that way. Even if you're working in a big team, you've got your stuff to do and you just go do it. At least that's kind of my mindset. So I love going to conferences and I love chatting with my book friends that I've made across the country and across the different genres. But, at the end of the day, to write a book, you've got to just sit down and show up for yourself.
Mhm. And is the process a particularly long one for you?
It's pretty short. Well, I mean, like the first draft is
Yeah.
usually a couple months or
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Right.
But then, like I said, it's got to go through all those people that I feel grateful to have their input. There, see, gratitude. I'd get the developmental letters and I'm like, no, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But I'm like way better at that now.
And does your husband ever say, where did that come from?
Yeah, like I say, I mean, he tells people he sleeps with one eye open, but I don't really think he does. Maybe he does when I'm over scribbling down my notes for the next book. But yeah, I mean, sometimes he'll know where the story came from, at least maybe the characters, or it reminds him something or something I've told him about that's happened. So, but they are all like Paul is kind of a mashup of all my spectacularly horrible male bosses over the years. So, I mean, it was pretty clear. He's like, oh, was that Wes? I'm like, yeah, Wes and Myron, all those guys are in there. So yeah.
And now that you're a Californian, do you think of yourself as a Californian writer? Because in somebody's home, Oceanside is almost as much a character as any of the other people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm 5th generation Californian. My mom and dad are both from California. So I've always considered myself a Californian. It just took me a long time to get Harley out here. So anyway, but yes, to that point, my settings used to be like Here Home Hope was in Ohio, and all the different, like my first novels were all set in Ohio because that was kind of the setting that I knew, and where we raised our kids and everything. So now California is very much part of my storytelling. And yeah, The Favorite Daughter is set here in Southern California as well, and Somebody's Home too. And then The Next Wife and Best Day Ever are Ohio. And like I said, my next one is set in Washington, D.C., where I got to stomp around a little bit for a couple of years. So it got into my heart and head enough to be able to set something there.
So tell us about your next book as much as you can without giving too much away.
I mean, I don't even have like that back cover thing to read you yet. But whoever writes the back covers is just brilliant. I am not a synopsis writing person. So anyway, so it is called The Widow, and it's out November 15th. And it has to do with a cheating congressman who meets an untimely demise. And so his wife must step in to take his seat. Something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Something like that. Well, it's based on this notion called the widow's mandate, which is really how most of the first women who served in the House or Senate came to get to serve in Congress. It would be when their spouse passed away, and in the Senate, a governor will appoint the wife to fill the rest of the term, and in Congress they call a special election and the wife will run for the rest of the term. And usually win just because the name recognition as well as like the sympathy vote. You kind of remember Sonny Bono when he died suddenly, like, yeah. So that's been a tradition through the generations, and it's not law or anything like that. It's just more of a tradition. And I thought that was an interesting starting place for a book.
So do you think there's a sort of Californian sensibility that writers have and others don't? I mean, if you think of yourself now as a Californian writer, I mean, I guess what I'm going at is, what does that mean? You can always tell a New York writer because there's this sort of bitter ennui. But what is a Californian writer?
I don't know. A California writer feels really happy to be in California
Yeah.
because it's warm and sunny, and she was in Ohio for a really long time. So I don't know. As far as like my writing style, I think it's the same because, like I said, I think my setting is suburbs.
Yeah.
No matter where. So, I mean, I'm happy to be sitting here in Ohio. I mean, not in Ohio because it's really cold in Ohio right now, but hopefully my stories resonate whether you are in Ohio and freezing at the moment or in Texas or wherever you are. That's kind of my hope, that you're like, okay, this could be happening just down the street.
Yeah. I was reading once about Kurt Vonnegut and Ray Bradbury meeting each other at a party. And needless to say, they did not get along. And Bradbury was saying, well, of course, he's an East Coast writer. He's unhappy. And I'm a West Coast writer. I'm happy.
Well, yeah, it's pretty spectacular out here, I have to admit. Yeah, I do. I like pinch myself still every day that we're here, and it's great.
Yeah. So I think the suburbs get a bad rap. I mean, everybody seems to think that everything happens in the city, but you know, like the Miss Marple stories of Agatha Christie, so much happens outside of urban areas that is so compelling and so real. What is it about suburbia that speaks to you? Because obviously you've also lived in cities. You could have written a big city novel.
Right. And that's why, I mean, I guess DC would be considered my first city novel. But then again, I mean, The Hill's kind of like a really compact, condensed, crazy suburb too. So I don't know, maybe there's a little crossover on that too. I don't, it's just like what's happening next door. Like I just wrote a little article for Crime Reads about this. It's just, there's nothing more terrifying than thinking like you're going, like the whole notion is you could just walk next door and borrow a cup of sugar. That used to be like kind of the thing, but it's not really that. It's not that simple, right? It's never been that simple, and it just isn't that simple because, the guy across the street yells at his dog, or there's you have little glimpses into the lives of your neighbors, but you don't necessarily know what's happening behind closed doors. You just don't. So I don't know why I like that kind of premise, but it's just an unlimited supply of situations and stories, I think.
And do you think the burbs are changing in some way? Or they're a sort of constant?
I don't know. I think certain burbs change and like continue to grow. The burbs that are like bound by other burbs maybe don't change as much. So like the old burbs, does that make sense? Yeah, I kind of like, those are the burbs I'm kind of looking at, like the burbs where people have maybe lived there 2 generations or 3 generations of family, and they have enough money that they don't have to care about like the basics of living, so they have time to, what I call, care about the curtains. And to me, if you're really, really passionate about curtains or like changing the curtains, then you need to find something else to do, like maybe do literacy volunteers would be good or something like that,
Nice.
So yes, sure.
Nice plug.
Sorry, that was a plug. Yeah. So yeah, I don't, it's just an endlessly fascinating.
So you've been so supportive of women in business and women in publishing and women writers. What would you say to any of our listeners who are women and thinking of going down this particular career path?
Oh gosh, the thing that got me started about, gosh, kind of the empowering women and well, a lot of things, but I started a shelter for homeless families back in Columbus in my 20s as a volunteer. And these women were holding everything together. They really were. And I just like, and then working in the real estate world where, there were still, most of the brokerages were owned by men, and the women were the sales associates, and but 92% of the customers, women make or influence 93% or something like that of real estate decisions, right? So you just can't, but still all the marketing was two men standing in front of yard signs, shaking hands, that kind of stuff. That just honks me off. So, you just have to stick up for people and stand up for what's right. I used to give speeches at the real estate company and say, and then when you talk to her and people are like, her, who's her? I'm like, that's your customer. Come on. So anyway, we've come a long way since then. That was the, 2000s, but we haven't really. So there's a lot more to do. And yeah, that's kind of my sensibility and the way I look at the world, and hoping to make it a better place for the next generation and the third wave and all that. But as far as a career as an author, all you need to do is sit down and start writing if you want to write. That's what's beautiful about this. Like, even if you have 10 minutes extra time, or if you're crazy raising kids and doing all that stuff, you can, just take a little time for yourself and just start writing.
Okay. And are you a morning writer or an afternoon writer?
I am not a morning person, so no. I'm a morning, do all the other stuff like the email stuff and all of that. And then I'll usually start writing early afternoon. I mean, that's not to say like when the kids were still at home and everything was crazy, then I would be a night writer or any time that I could write in the, in the spaces. But now it's just me and the dogs. I usually write in the afternoon.
Okay. But I know your time is actually getting tighter. Weren't you just recruited to a rather special volunteer committee?
Yes, this is so exciting. You can call me Commissioner Kaira now.
Hello, Commissioner. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I just was appointed by the governor to the California Volunteers Commission, and it's headed by Josh Friday, and he's the Chief Service Officer for the state of California. And the whole goal of the commission is to get everyone to volunteer in their neighborhood at least 1 hour a week. And so if we had everyone in the state doing that, it would be amazing. Like, we could really, really make a difference. And this commission oversees the food Operation Feed and all of the food programs in the state. AmeriCorps, which is the biggest AmeriCorps in the country, is under this commission. They just launched Climate Corps, which is going to be amazing. And they just, it was just announced like this week, where if you give time as a kid to your community, you can apply for a grant to a bunch of different colleges in the state. Will help support you with grants. So you're giving service, you're learning about your community, and then you're also going to get help with going to college. So it's a great commission. Wow. I'm so proud to be on it. Yeah.
How are you going to find time?
Oh, well, that's fun for me. I mean, that service and giving back, that's what makes, when you give to your community, when you volunteer, as you guys know who do the literacy volunteer, you get back so much more in return than you give. And that's what makes life special and good, helping others. And it's not trite, it's true. It's, I've never volunteered and not gotten so much back, by doing it.
So aside from your next book, Commissioner, and I'm so excited because I haven't spoken to a commissioner before. So
and I haven't been one before, so it's very new. I need a desk plate that says commissioner, back here.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what you do as a commissioner.
It needs the commissioner.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm just a commissioner of
the
commission. But yes, I feel very, very special having that title. I don't know what it means really, but anyway, it's great.
Oh no, congratulations. It's quite a crew, and you'll be very, very, very busy doing that, and books. So aside from your book coming out this November, did you say your next book?
Yes, and November 15th. You can pre-order now.
Pre-order now, and Somebody's Home, which is available at your local library, but also at Lido Books and Barnes and Noble and Amazon.com and anywhere where good books are sold. What is next for you? You seem to have accomplished so much. I mean, you've done business, you've done entrepreneurship, you've obviously done advocacy work. You're having a successful book career. Good heavens, I'm tired just saying it. So what is next for you?
I would love to keep doing this. I mean, this is what I've always dreamed of being since third grade, Kaira, and it's just such it's just such an honor to be able to write books and have people read the books and, keep people up late at night. I love that. That's like the best compliment. People say that. It's so fun. And yeah, so I think I'm pretty much doing it. I mean, I hope to keep improving my craft and, this whole crime reader, thriller reader, suspense reader, all the readers are getting very sophisticated. And so they're on to you with twists and stuff. So you got to stay one step ahead. And yeah, so hopefully keep learning and keep growing as a writer and keep giving back to the community. I think that's key too.
Yeah. Well, so let me, on behalf of literacy volunteers, first off, say thank you, but also say congratulations on all that you've accomplished, all that you're accomplishing. I read Somebody's Home last night. It kept me awake. And I was delighted to read it. I loved also Best Day Ever, which you had to see my library copy here. Which I'll be honest, I'm like, she can't go anywhere with this. And about a few pages in, I go, oh my goodness, she's going to get away with this, and it's going to be spectacular. And it was really quite spectacular. It was just a sort of tour de force, as is, I believe, the changing point of views at Somebody's Home. So congratulations to you. I would like everyone that's watching to remember that we have some wonderful things on our silent auction. Bidding is still open. Feel free. You can see where the link for the auction, and that'll be open until Monday evening at 7. And afterwards, you can go to the Huntington Beach Public Library on Talbot and pick up your prizes. One more grateful thanks to Kaira Rouda, who's obviously a severe depressive and a very happy woman. And I've never had such a down interview in my life with somebody so gloomy.
I'm sorry, Bob. I'll try to be happier next time.
Oh yeah. Cheer up, Kaira.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the great questions. And I saw a question scroll by in the chat that I can't remember what it was. Something about Best Day Ever, but I'm sorry. Whoever said that, now it's gone. Okay. Oh, any significance of the phrase Best Day Ever used so much in the book, including the title, like related to, and are you asking that? Well, so this is, I don't know if this is the question, but I try to, in all my books, and this is just fun if you happen to read any of mine, put the titles of the ones that came before in it, like kind of little Easter eggs. So I do have Best Day Ever in all of these books, that phrase. It's my own little fun thing. And so, yeah, in the next wife, you'll find the favorite daughter and Best Day Ever. And in Somebody's Home, you'll find Best Day Ever, favorite daughter, and the next wife. So that's fun. And the phrase really didn't have any significance when it popped into my head for Best Day Ever, other than it's written in about a couple in one day. So there you go.
And it was indeed the best. Again, thank you so much for Somebody's Home. It was the best read I've had in quite some time. I was absolutely delighted.
Thank you. And thank you to Toledo Books too for participating in all this too.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night. And
good night.
Good luck. Bye-bye.